British critic Anthony Tolby once said, Kafka certainly does not provide an interpretation of the world. What he does provide is an image of how experience looks when all interpretations are called in doubt. Today we are going to discuss Franz Kafka's famous novella, The Metamorphisis. Kafka was an influential 20th century writer of short stories, novellas, and novels. He is considered a modernist writer along with James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, and D.H. Lawrence. As you probably know, modernism is a term used to refer to diverse tendencies and movements in different arts. The common characteristics of modernism include a disenchantment with traditional forms of artistic expression, radical experimentation, and a questioning of norms. In D.H. Lawrence's words, modernism showed the world the possibility of living without believing in the official version of reality. In his works, Kafka created a surreal world to represent realities that lay submerged beneath the surface of contemporary life. This included the oppressive and clandestine working of the political establishment. There are certain recurring themes in Kafka's works, such as the absurdity of existence, the alienating experience of modern life, and the incomprehensibility of authoritarian power. Today we have the adjective Kafkaesque to refer to impersonal bureaucracies, surreal happenings, and anything ominous. His major novels include The Trial, The Castle, and America. Like many of his works, these also remain unfinished in one way or the other. Among his stories, In the Penal Colony and The Judgment are the most well known. Kafka was born in 1883 to middle-class, German-speaking Jewish parents in Prague. Then Bohemia, of which Prague was the capital, was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Kafka's father, Hermann Kafka, was a hugely built man of selfish and overbearing temperament. He worked as a traveling salesman for some time. Remember that this is a profession which Kafka chooses for Gregor Samsa, the protagonist of The Metamorphisis. Hermann Kafka soon established himself as a retailer of fancy goods and accessories. His mother, Julie, who was better educated, assisted her husband in his business. Franz Kafka was the eldest of the couple's 6 children. Once it is common to trace every phenomenon in Kafka's works to the ill treatment he received at the hands of his domineering father. Indeed, the relationship was severely troubled. In a 45-page letter to his father, written in 1919, he complains of the emotional impact of this authoritarian, abusive, and demanding figure. After graduating with a law degree, Kafka worked for 2 insurance companies. Although he was meticulous in the discharge of his duties, he disliked his job. Psychological studies of Kafka's life and work have revealed that he suffered from a schizoid personality disorder, characterized by love of solitude, lack of interest in relationships, and emotional coldness. His works are also considered a product of this schizoid personality. Anyhow, he had an inner life of anguish, agony, and fear. Some scholars believe that Kafka's psychological problems stem from his having internalized the ostracization and stereotyping of Jews in anti-Semitic Europe. Kafka got engaged to Felice Bauer, but the relationship did not materialize in marriage. He was also involved in a relationship with 2 other women. Kafka was part of the famous Prague school of German Jewish writers. He suffered from tuberculosis, which was incurable at the beginning of the 20th century. He died in 1924. The last days of Kafka's life were marked by deteriorating health, family tensions, unsuccessful love relationships, and most important of all, intense creativity. During the Second World War, his sisters became the victims of the Holocaust. the mass extermination of the Jews by the Nazis. Although Kafka knew Czech well, he wrote all his works in German. In fact, he wanted his works to be burnt, but his friend and biographer Max Brod compiled, edited, and had them published. Many of his works are said to be still missing. Probably some of them were destroyed during the Bücherverbrennung, the burning of the so-called degenerate books by the Nazis. The novella, The Metamorphisis, was written in the course of 3 weeks during the autumn of 1912. It was published in 1915. It is the only long work which Kafka finished during his lifetime. The Metamorphosis is called the Verwandlung in German. The story opens with Gregor Samsa, a traveling salesman, waking to find himself transformed into a monstrous insect-like creature. Obviously, he is confused. Everything in the room except his own appearance seems normal as before. Gregor decides to fall asleep again and forget what happened in the hope that things will become normal. He tries to roll over to his right, but he is unable to move his body. He is stuck on his hard, curved back. He tries to scratch his itching stomach with his leg, but he finds that the area has become too sensitive for touch. Besides his changed physical condition, Gregor also reflects on the monotony of his job as a traveling salesman. He would have quit if the family had not been dependent upon his income. He realizes that he has overslept and missed his train for work. Now it is time for the others to learn about Gregor's transformation. His mother knocks on the door. When he answers her, she notices that his voice has changed. She gets worried. Gregor was very close to his sister Grete. Waiting outside, she also begs him to open the door. His family members think that he is ill. He tries to get out of bed, but is incapable of moving his body. His office manager has also showed up. With immense force, Gregor throws himself on the floor and replies that he will open the door. But nobody can understand Gregor's replies. They are so unclear. When the office manager notices a delay in Gregor's opening of the door, he warns him of dire consequences. Finally, he opens the door and apologizes to the manager. Horrified by Gregor's appearance, the manager runs out of the apartment. Gregor tries to catch up with him, but his father drives him into the bedroom with the help of a rolled paper and a cane. Gregor is injured and exhausted in the act. In the second part, Gregor finds some milk and bread kept in his room. Though initially excited, he soon discovers that he has lost his taste for milk. This is one of his favorite food items in the past. But when his sister replaces the milk with rotten scraps of food, he eats this happily. This shows his increasing dehumanization. He spends most of his time under the couch. He does so as not to frighten his sister when she comes in to feed him. He also listens to his family members talking, particularly about their financial difficulties after Gregor stopped working. His mother wants to visit him, but his father and sister dissuade her. Gregor gets increasingly accustomed to his changed physical state. He tries to crawl on the walls and the ceiling for amusement. To facilitate his easy movement, his sister and mother remove the furniture from his room. This is of course good for Gregor, but he tries to save a picture hanging on the wall. This is the picture of a woman wearing fur hat, fur scarf and fur muff. Perhaps the picture symbolizes Gregor's former humanity. The picture was hung on the wall when Gregor was still human. The picture also symbolizes his sexual desires or his desire for companionship. His mother sees him hanging on the wall and passes out of the room. He runs into the kitchen. His father, returning from his new job, misunderstands the situation. He thinks that Gregor has tried to harm his mother. He throws apples at Gregor. One of the apples sinks into his back and remains lodged there. Gregor is severely injured. In this part, we learn much about Gregor's sense of guilt at having caused fear and trouble to his loved ones. In the last part of the metamorphosis, Gregor's family seems to be getting used to his new habits. They also seem to understand his needs for a while. They begin leaving his door open every evening for a few hours so that he can watch them. Gregor notices that his family members have worn down because of their new poverty. The situation is too much for them to bear, and soon even Grete begins to resent her brother. The family replaces their maid with a cheap cleaning lady who tolerates Gregor. To make both ends meet, they also take on a few boarders. They have to move excess furniture to Gregor's room. This, of course, distresses Gregor. He has also lost his taste for the food which Grete brings. He almost stops eating. One evening, the cleaning lady leaves Gregor's door open. His sister Grete plays a violin before the boarders, and her brother walks out of his room in order to listen. The boarders spot the insect and they are alarmed. The incident culminates in their decision to vacate the house without paying the rent. The family is convinced that they should get rid of Gregor now, and they wish that he leaves on his own accord. In order to rid his family of his presence, Gregor dies. The family feels a great sense of relief. Life has become normal for them once again. They ride out into the countryside. Months of spare living has left them with a lot of savings. Grete's parents begin thinking of finding a husband for her. Under what genre can we classify the metamorphosis? In terms of length and complexity, this work of Kafka's is assigned to a category of fiction called the novella or novelette. Novellas are longer and more complex than short stories, but shorter and simpler than novels. The novella deals with a limited number of characters, a relatively short period of time, and a single chain of events. Among the famous novellas in literary history, we can mention Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, Henry James's The Turn of the Screw, and Thomas Mann's Death in Venice. Probably Kafka chose the form of the novella for two interrelated reasons. Its brevity enabled him to produce a unified and concentrated effect. Its length helped him write a sustained narrative. In terms of the mode, The Metamorphosis is a work of fantasy fiction. Some critics see it as a work of magical realism. As you probably know, magical realism is an aesthetic style and a mode of fiction which credibly blends magical and fantastic elements with the real. The Metamorphosis treats Gregor's transformations as if it were a natural event or a random occurrence. His family members react to the unusual event as if it were a natural occurrence, like contracting a disease. They are more disgusted than shocked. Russian author Vladimir Nabokov once commented that the straightforward style of the Metamorphosis is in striking contrast to the nightmare of the tale. The narrative point of view used in the story is limited third person. The events of the fictional world are narrated through the eyes of the protagonist, Gregor Samsa. Kafka gives us Gregor's thoughts and feelings only. We do not know about the other characters' thoughts unless Gregor thinks about their thoughts or they themselves show us through their words and actions. This manner of narration makes Gregor's inner reality seem more important than the happenings in the external world. Let me conclude this part with some observations on Kafka's style. Kafka utilizes the possibilities of German. Like his other works, the Metamorphosis also employs long sentences. Often there is some unexpected impact pending till the end of the sentence. This may not be obvious to the reader of English translations. As is often said, literature is what is lost in translation. But Kafka's translators have taken great care in reproducing this impact. Look at the opening sentence of the Metamorphosis in Villa and Edwin Muir's translation. As Gregor Samsa awoke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a gigantic insect. When the sentence opens, we have no sense of the impending shock. Kafka's work is not the first tale of transformation. For instance, we find a series of transformations in the Roman poet Ovid's mythological mock epic Metamorphises. Kafka's The Metamorphosis has rich undertones and may easily be read as an allegory or a symbolic tale. One may approach the novella from various perspectives. In fact, one reason for Kafka's popularity is that his works are ambiguous and enigmatic. They are open to multiple interpretations. A biographical interpretation of the work would read Gregor's miserable insect life as an analogue of Kafka's own frail and petrified existence before his robust and domineering father. Remember that Gregor's father is the most insensitive character in the work. He is the only person who resorts to physical violence against Gregor. The father in the Metamorphosis is widely considered to be a literary personification of his real-life counterpart. The Metamorphosis is a tale of alienation. It is read as the fictional version of Kafka's own sense of alienation, as a German in a predominantly Czech-speaking area, as a Jew in anti-Semitic Europe, and as a relapsed Jew with little connection to Orthodox Judaism. During Kafka's time, almost all the residents of Prague were ethnic Czechs who spoke the Czech language. Only about 6% of the city's population, including Kafka's family, were German speakers. About 5% of the population. They mostly lived in a ghetto and had their own schools, newspapers, theaters, and cafes. Franz Kafka's double minority status as a German-speaking Jew in a Christian, Czech-speaking world had a powerful, perhaps unconscious influence on his writing. Let me point out that the word used in the German original for the English insect is Ungeziefer. This word can be translated as a dung beetle. Literally, the German word Ungeziefer means an unclean animal which is unfit for religious sacrifice. The word connotes a sense of separation between the protagonist and his environment. Gregor is somebody who is unclean and must therefore be secluded. An important aspect of this alienation is estrangement in relationships. At the beginning of the novella itself, we learn that Gregor has no friends or relationships, and that he leads a drab and dreary life. Later on, it's not only Gregor's physical form which undergoes a metamorphosis. The novella is also about a metamorphosis of human relationships. After Gregor's transformation, the family struggles with feelings of sympathy and revulsion. His mother and sister care for him, but his father goes to the extent of physically attacking him. As the narrative progresses, the psychological distance between Gregor and his family increases. Under physical stress and financial constraints, they want to get rid of him. Even the close bond which he shared with his sister Greta fades. The novella is partly about the limits of human sympathy under extreme circumstances. For many readers, Gregor's dehumanizing transformation and subsequent feelings of alienation epitomize the human condition during the modern times. At the beginning of the 20th century, wars and conflicts loomed large on the horizon of Europe. There were tensions between racial and ethnic groups. The traditional family, whose web of relationships and values couched the individual against the shocks of life, was breaking up, and the economy was becoming mechanical. Man was reduced to the status of a cog in the wheel. Religion was recognized as the opiate of the masses. God was declared dead. There was no theological or metaphysical foundation to impart any meaning to the crisscross of events and non-events called life. Kafka's The Metamorphisis captures the absurdity of modern existence in the form of an allegorical tale. A point to be noted here is that there is no explanation for Gregor's transformation. Many events in Kafka's works simply happen. Another example is the arrest of Joseph K. in the novel The Trial. They simply happen. There is no explanation. The events of the metamorphosis are absurd, unnatural, irrational, and chaotic. They border on the supernatural. We do not know the cause of the chief event of the novella, Gregor's transformation into an insect. Was Gregor punished for a sin which he committed? There's no answer. This suggests a universe which functions without any underlying order or principle. That is why many of Kafka's works are considered engagements with absurdity. The events of the metamorphosis take place in an apartment in an unspecified place and at an unspecified time. The absence of topographical and temporal specifics suggests that absurdity is a universal condition. These interpretations make the metamorphosis a classic of existentialism, a philosophy which believes that man is a unique and isolated being in a meaningless and hostile world. Let us note that despite the bodily transformation, Gregor's mind remains intact. This suggests a disconnect or disharmony between the mind and the body. For example, when his sister serves him milk, mentally he is excited. He desires to have his favorite food, but his palate cannot take it. Gradually, he develops habits which are in tune with his changed physical condition. An example is his crawling on the walls and ceiling as a pastime. Does this imply a kind of bodily determinism? Does our physical life determine our mental life instead of the other way around?